And if you are friendly with them, you say, wow, okay, we laughed at you, but you were right. And you merge it back in. And then it's a good thing to fork. So forks are not bad. The reason people think forks are bad is because, like the traditional Unix forks, where you couldn't merge back in because people would then hide the actual code, right? So then forks turn into competition between different companies that essentially end up re-implementing the same things over and over and over again because they're not really helping each other. They're just trying to be different.
Just one question more I need to do is about patents.
But go ahead. Yeah, I don't know what to say about patents. They're bad.
Yeah, but it's getting crazy. I mean, they are buying Kodak because of what are they going to patent?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, everybody hates patents. That's the sad part. I mean, literally everybody hates patents. Even the big companies that are spending, or especially the big companies that
maybe not the lawyers.
The lawyers don't hate it. Yeah, you're right. The lawyers actually like the fact that it's a good revenue stream. Well, even lawyers often, probably, I suspect, deep down, they think it's a racket, but it's a racket that makes them money. So, there's like the patent trolls that take advantage of the situation. I don't think they really like the patents. It's just that if you have a broken system where you can try to take advantage of the system, people will do that. And so I don't think the patent trolls are the problem. I think that the companies that troll the patents are a symptom of the fact that the patent system is broken.
Where is it going?
I don't know. I really don't know. In the software world, patents are painful for everybody. The companies that literally spend billions of dollars on patents, most of them spend the money not because they like patents, but because they feel they have to in order to protect themselves.
But maybe Steve Jobs liked patents. I mean,
so everybody likes the patents they own and that they can use
I think that he's used also the patent system to stop other innovations.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Not only to fight, but to keep them calm for a while.
Yeah, and other companies have done the same thing. Most companies, I mean, there are advantages to patents if you own them, and you can use them to try to maintain a monopoly, and that's kind of the idea of a patent, right, is to get the monopoly in a certain market. And being a monopoly in a lucrative market is a really nice position to be in. So companies do like that concept of them. The problem is most companies that actually create real products, all the upsides of owning the patents tend to be outweighed by the fears of other people owning the patents. So even the patent owners, they don't feel safe in the owning of patents because they know other people own them too. So the only ones who have almost no downsides are the patent trolls, because nobody else can attack them for patents because they don't make anything.
Yeah.
So they can attack people without ever having to fear about being attacked. And they like patents for that reason. But I think I understand why they do it. I think it's nasty and I think it's wrong. There are companies, so it's a standard term for companies that basically they own patents, but they don't make anything themselves.
They don't have patent for fight to others,
yes.
basically.
So,
for example?
There's Nathan Myhrvold from, he really doesn't like his company being called a patent troll company. What is the company called? IVP?
Nobody would like it.
Intellectual Venture
like
Partners,
that,
IVP. Yeah.
Mostly
they don't do anything at all. They buy up patents in order to sue other people.
Usually they work for companies that have patent also.
And quite often the way you tell a patent troll is that in the US, they sue other companies, and they sue other companies in specific places, notably East Texas. Which makes no sense at all, because neither the patent troll nor the company they're suing is actually making business in East Texas. But it turns out the legal system the jurors in East Texas tend to be friendly to patent owners.
But what Linux do about that?
I don't know. I mean, so the licensees like the GPL version 2, tend to have patent clauses in them. That may help a bit. I'm not sure. It means that Linux companies themselves can't fight each other with patents. It doesn't help with non-Linux companies. With non-Linux companies, there are the patent pools that have been set up. It's one thing Linux Foundation has been doing, but it's also something that IBM has been doing. And so a lot of the companies involved in Linux have been involved in these patent pools where the idea is A, they own the patents for use, but B, they can also sometimes use the patent pools for offensive purposes if somebody attacks Linux. And then so I don't know. I mean, the only sane solution in the long run is to fix some of the patent mess. And I'm actually somewhat hopeful just because I really do think that almost all companies dislike patents more than they like them. Because the patents are not an open source only problem. It's absolutely not about open source. It's a problem for anybody doing development, especially software. Patents, I think, work better outside of software than they do. There have been companies who have actually tried to kind of use open source as a model, not for doing source code, but as a management model, where it took us often a year after hardware came out. We had to figure out how the hardware worked, usually with no help from the manufacturer. And it took us a year before we had a driver. And sometimes the driver wasn't that good. So on the graphics side, for example, maybe we had a driver that worked, but it wasn't really fast, for example. Things are improving a lot, and a big reason for that is Linux is so big in certain markets that the device manufacturers will actually help. So now they will give, even if they don't write code, they will give us documentation for almost everything. Not everything, but it's gotten to the point where there will often be documentation even before the hardware is released that gets put in the hand of Linux developers. Yeah, but it was more successful than the Microsoft model in certain other respects. So for example, we had a much easier migration path when CPUs started becoming 64-bit. It took Microsoft much longer, and 64-bit Windows still doesn't support almost any of the old devices, because there are no device drivers for those devices. And Linux actually had an easier time because, well, it wasn't an easier time, it was just that we had spent the effort on writing the device drivers, and we had the source code, and so we could support 64-bit environments and just recompile the drivers. The support will happen if you just get enough of a infrastructure, and then you get this positive feedback where if you have a lot of users, then you will have companies that want to support it. But even without the companies, if you have a lot of users, you will know somebody else who uses this, so you will talk to each other. So there's a kind of chicken and egg problem, and this is again the same thing. It's a very hard market to enter. They need to sell their machines to you. They need to sell their machines to your mothers and grandmothers and people who are not interested in the machine. They want to get a new machine that does the same thing their old machine does. Okay. So it's hard. They'd love not to pay Microsoft for a license fee. I mean, they'd love to use OS X and not pay for that either, right? They love Linux in that sense. It's hard to get over the hump. You need to get critical mass.
Have you thought about 20 years ago that you were going to write to this point 20 years later?
No.
Not even.
And I can explain to you what the problems are. I don't actually care. To me, it's not why I'm doing Linux, right? To me, it's an interesting phenomenon, and I see it happening, and I see why certain markets take on Linux much slower. I mean, in the server markets, we went from 0 to like 20% of the market in very early on. I mean,
what do you think when you see all this war running on something similar to your name?
It's not how I think. I used to hate cell phones. I still don't like them as phones. I think phones are annoying, nasty things. I like small portable computers, right? And I really like using a computer that runs Linux, right? So that makes me happy. But at the same time, the fact that, okay, Google and Amazon and everybody else runs Linux, they're not running what I did. They're running stuff that they helped work on themselves. And the fact that I started it all makes me proud, but it's not something I think about. It's not something I think.
Well, but you have
Every day I think, ooh, I did another Google query and it was using Linux to do that. And I don't do that, right? I don't care about it.